Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to another episode of Code Porn. There's been a lot of chatter on Twitter and Facebook about a new project that's come out that allows you to write HTML5 and JavaScript applications using C# and XAML. So I decided to go ahead and give you guys a first-hand look at the beta version of this project. So let's go ahead and check it out. So the first thing you want to do is head over to cshtml5.com and download the installer. Now at the moment, because this just came out, it's a beta version and they're limiting the download to the first 5,000 people. So go ahead and put in your email address, and if you're within the first 5,000, then they'll send you an email with a link to download. But I've already downloaded it, so we'll go ahead and not worry about that. Essentially they claim zero learning time, which is fairly true because if you already know C# and XAML, really that's all you're going to be working with, so you don't really have to learn anything. Now if you're already familiar with XAML, making these projects is going to be a lot easier than trying to figure out how to do the equivalent code in HTML5. Now some of you might say, well, HTML5 is pretty simple and it has a lot of features, so what is the benefit? Well, XAML is extremely powerful and it allows you to do some pretty crazy things really easily. The biggest thing is the two-way binding that XAML has. It's really efficient, it's really nice to work with, especially if you're working with MVVM frameworks. And of course C#, it's going to be a lot faster and easier to develop your code, including code with advanced features, than it is trying to figure out how to do the equivalent in JavaScript. And of course, since you are going to be doing everything in C# and XAML, you get to use the power of Visual Studio. So that means debugging, IntelliSense, unit testing, and so on. The biggest thing that I think this is going to be used for, at least that's what I'm hoping for, is the ability to take your existing projects, and I have some legacy projects written in WPF, a Windows Phone app, and some Silverlight apps, taking that code and converting it over with little or no effort. So hopefully that's the way this goes. Let's jump over to Visual Studio and take a look at how this thing actually works. So I've already gone ahead and installed the package. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new project. Now you notice underneath the Visual C#, you'll see C# XAML for HTML5. Now inside of here you have a couple options. You've got empty application, class library, and then you've got a pre-installed sample calculator application. We're going to go ahead and open that first. Now one thing you notice is you can't actually see the resulting rendered XAML. And that's kind of a downer for me. Hopefully that changes in the future. But down here you can see the actual XAML code, so it's not a big deal. This is a calculator. It's got a bunch of buttons in here, so it's standard XAML code if you're familiar with XAML. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and run this. In the simulator window, you've got two options. You've got this intermediate version, which they say is C# and HTML, but no XAML. And that's useful if you're going to debug your application. And then what you see is a simulator of an iPhone, or at least an iPhone image, sitting over your application that's running. And then inside here, we've got our functional application. All right, no big deal. You can do the drop down, change the different orientations. You can go from iPhone to iPad and just kind of check out your application and see how it works. In this other tab, final version, which is supposed to be pure JavaScript and HTML, so there's no C#. You've got click to run in the browser, and then you can click to view the produced files in File Explorer. I highly recommend you take a look at this just to see what it's actually producing. So what we see here are a couple JS files, and the naming of these files should be pretty familiar to you. But go ahead and just browse through it and see exactly what's going on. It's very interesting. So we will click Run in the browser. And we have a working application. Now again, this was all C# and XAML, as you can see. All C#, all of the button click handlers, all C#. There's no trickery there. So that's pretty neat. If you already had an existing application, how long would it take you to convert it over to HTML5 and JavaScript. Now that's all good and well. Sample applications usually always work. So let's go ahead and create our own. You'll notice I already have 2 projects in this solution. We're going to come back to those in a minute. But let's add a new project. Again, we're going to go to C# XAML for HTML5, create an empty application. So we're creating a new project. It's all empty. All you have is app.xaml and the main page. Let's open up main page and scroll this up since we can't see what we're actually building. And we'll just delete that. We'll add a stack panel. We'll add a text blocks for our current time. And then we'll add a button. Now, what I found by playing around with this is you have to specify a background color. Otherwise, the button actually won't appear on the end result. So I'm going to set the background to black, and then I'll just set the foreground to white. Content, update time. Oh, and then we need a click handler. Okay. So that's our XAML. Save that. Now over in the button handler, let's just update the text blocks with the current time. We'll save that. And we're good to go. Let's go ahead and run this. So now what we see is an empty text box, and our button is actually sitting where the text box is going to be because we didn't add any initial text to the text blocks. But this is the button, so let's go ahead and click on it. When we click on it, now we see our current time. And we can click it again, so on and so forth. Okay, so that works. Not too bad. And if you want, you can't really see it because my screen resolution. There's a button down here called Inspect DOM Tree. So you can click on that and you can actually see that you're looking at an HTML stack. But let's go ahead and click Run in the browser and see what it looks like in the browser. Okay, so we've got our button. That's what we saw last time. Uh-oh. Now when we click on it, instead of actually seeing the time value, we're seeing too long time string. Now this is a problem because if we look at what's happening, we see that this project is using JSIL. And if you're not familiar with JSIL, JSIL is a compiler that transforms your .NET code and libraries from their IL format or from the bytecode into cross-browser standard compliant JavaScript. Now, if you're not familiar with this project, I highly recommend checking it out. And because it transforms the actual bytecode, it'll support most languages. So if you do VB instead of C#, it'll still work for you. But as we can see from the project's webpage, there's still quite a bit that it doesn't support. So it's got about 90% support for the C# language and features. Over here in this column, you can see it doesn't support async await or link yet. And this is where the problem comes in. .NET types and framework classes. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit that's not supported, and I believe that's why we're not seeing the actual time, because those methods on date time are not being converted over. They're not being translated. So this might be an issue with this actual product, or it might be a JSIL issue. I'm not really sure. But this brings up another point. Down here, the XAML concepts, it's only about 20% supported. And the problem with this is binding and data context. Currently not supported. And I'm going to show you the 2 projects that I had loaded earlier to demonstrate this. But first, let's go back here, and you can see it's loading up all the JSIL stuff. But down here, it's loading up all of the scripts that it created. So you'll notice it's loading up essentially the JavaScript versions of your .NET assemblies that your project is referencing. And you can just hover over these to see which ones it is. That's a C# XAML for HTML5. Let's go up here and find another one. Okay, so here's the one for MS Core Lib. We'll go ahead and click on that. Might take a minute to load up. So you can just go through this file and take a look at what JSIL has done to convert the .NET assembly over to JavaScript. I'm not really going to go through what it's doing, but definitely take a look through here and see what's going on. It's very interesting. Okay, so that's the gist of how it's working in the background. Let's switch back over. And I will show you this WPF application that I created. Very simple application. All it has is a text block, and we're binding to the current time. In the view model, we're implementing iNotify property changed. And then we've got the property current time that we're binding to. So all I'm doing here, initializing a task, and inside that task, we're just in a while loop. We sleep for 1 second, and then we update the current time value with whatever the current time is. Let's go ahead and run this. And of course, we see exactly what we expect. So every second, our time is getting updated. So now trying to convert that over to the XAML to HTML5 was a little bit tricky. So initially, I had text block binding set up, but as you can see, binding is not supported. So what that means is you're going to spend your time, at least initially, until binding becomes supported inside of the code behind. Now, for some people, that's not a problem. Other people, they love MVVM. They don't like code behinds, whatever. So we've got a text block. Now let's take a look at the code behind. So what I had initially was a task, and we've got our task here. And inside the task, I've got this code commented out. It was the while loop, thread sleep, and then update the current time. But the problem is, when I ran this code, it ran okay inside of the simulator, but it did not run on the browser. It actually froze up the browser and crashed the browser. So I'm not sure if that's a threading issue that hasn't been addressed yet or it's not supported, but that's something that you'll have to work through. So what I did was I just commented out the while loop, and I would have been satisfied with just updating the current time, but that's when I found out that it actually doesn't update to the current time. What we see is the toString as the value for current time. So the tasks do work, and that is a good sign. So instead, what we have is the button click, just like we did in our previous demo, to update the time. At the moment, not everything can be converted, even though it looks like it might be. And even though it runs in the simulator, it's not going to run inside of the browser. Okay, so you can see every second it's getting updated. Of course, our button works. But when we click on the Run in Browser, and the browser's just going to sit here until it actually says, hey, something's wrong. And I'm not actually able to bring up the developer console, so it looks like a serious issue. So I'm just going to kill this. So there it is. That's a first-hand look at the beta version of C# and XAML for HTML5 extension. This is a very interesting project. I'm very excited about it, and hopefully we see a lot of good things coming from this project in the future. All right, that's it for this episode. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And be sure to check out previous episodes of Code Porn. If you have any suggestions or ideas for the show, or you'd like to be a guest on the show, go ahead and send an email to codeporn.show@gmail.com and let me know. Thanks for watching.